So, does gear matter? What do you think? I'm Oliver Lundy. I'm an automotive photographer, and I'm going to weigh in on this often controversial subject. I'm going to discuss both sides of it right now. Let's go. So, you often hear pros and YouTubers saying things like, the gear doesn't matter, man, it's all about the photographer. And while that can be true, and I'll go into that in a second, you often then see these exact same people using all pro gear that costs them tens of thousands of pounds. So where is the truth in this subject? And as with all good questions, the truth quite often is subjective to you, and it's also depends on the situation you're in. You know, what part of your career are you in? Are you a hobbyist? Are you a pro? Are you just getting into it? What are you shooting? What's the subject? All of that kind of stuff comes into play, but there are some principles that we can talk about that might help you understand this whole thing. So the whole argument of it's the photographer. Now, a lot of that is based on the idea that when you're a beginner, you tend to be quite focused on the gear. And it's very easy to fall into the trap of, oh, I'll be better or I'll get better results when I've got XYZ bit of gear, a new lens, a new camera body that can shoot higher resolution or whatever it might be. Now, the unfortunate truth of the matter is that's not going to make that big a difference. Now, if you're already capable of shooting a high level of photography, then gear can help you to up the quality of your final image, or it might unlock certain things that you wouldn't have been able to do without that gear. But it's conditional on you being competent already. And so a lot of people, a lot of pros see beginners buying really expensive gear, not realizing that the knowledge and the skill that you need to make the most of that gear is what you should have first. So if there's truth on both sides, what are those two sides? On one hand, there are certain things that genuinely do require certain types of gear to shoot. And a lot of these things might be genre specific, or a lot of them might be if you're trying to do a particular technique, and the gear that you would need to actually do that technique, like long exposures at night, for example, you're going to need a way of stabilizing the system, so a tripod is the obvious choice. Now, you can just plonk your camera on a bag on the side somewhere and get the same effect. So there are normally ways of kind of doing it on a budget to make it easier for you when you first start out. So the method and knowing how to do the thing is more important than the bit of gear that you might need or want to do the thing. I hope that makes sense. So with this in mind, I thought that I would put together a list of things that you can do or learn or focus on that will help you get better results without actually having to spend any money on gear at all, or in some cases, a very small amount of money. Now, I'm hoping that this will be useful for you so that when you start to improve and when you start to think, how can I get better? You don't automatically think, oh, I'm gonna go out and buy a £2,000 lens and that's just gonna up my game loads. Now, it might, but these things will hopefully help you more. So, number one is your knowledge and skill as the photographer. Now, this is a huge thing, and your knowledge and skill is something that you're going to be building up over time as you get more and more experience. However, going out and buying a whole brand new kit or an extra lens or whatever it might be won't increase your skill or knowledge. The only things that can do that are practice, learning and focusing on new techniques and new methods. And the more time you can put into your own education, whether that's through online courses, free stuff on YouTube like this, or going out to actual workshops with other photographers, hanging out with your mates and shooting with people who are more experienced than you, going to a photography club, whatever it might be, anything that you can do to up your skill level and your experience level is going to have a much bigger impact on your overall imagery than just a slightly sharper shot because you've got a slightly better lens now. So focusing on yourself as the photographer and focusing on your skill set will have the biggest impact on your overall performance as a photographer and the imagery that you create as a result. And really, this is the basis of this. It's not the gear, it's the photographer statement. So when it comes to automotive photography, there's a lot of things that you can do to up your game without having to spend money on gear. And the first one is just find better locations to shoot your cars. So This is a very industrial environment. It's just a car park, but it's nice and quiet, it's nice and empty, and I come here a lot to shoot. But you don't have to shoot in these types of environments. You can find all sorts of different environments to shoot, and you just have to build up a bank of places that you know that you can go and shoot. And this, the factors involved in locations it's a whole nother concept, but effectively you want good access. You want to guarantee that you're going to be able to always go there. It's not going to be too busy. You're going to have lots of options in terms of composition, and that you've got different versions of locations that suit the car. So for example, you wouldn't shoot a heavily modified car outside a country mansion, or vice versa. You wouldn't shoot a Ferrari in a dingy urban environment. I mean, you could, it kind of juxtapositions it, but you get what I'm saying. So just having a bank of locations that you can go to and you can use that are better than the next photographer who just goes along to meets and shoots whatever he can at meets, that will step your game up another level. And again, totally free. All you've got to do is keep an eye on locations when you're out and about. So when you're driving around, just be always thinking, I wonder if that would work. I wonder if that would work. What's that like at night? What's that like during the day? I wonder what this place is like at sunrise. Those kind of questions will help you build up a bank of locations, and then you can just save them into a map. Like Google Maps, for example, has a really good one where you can just save a list of places and you can write notes about what that place is like, so that in 2 years' time, when you're trying to remember about it, you've got your own notes showing you what was good about it, what was bad about it, certain things like whether or not security will show up, those kind of things that will help you in the future. So that's tip number 2. Okay, tip number 3. This is a really common one, but I see a lot of people getting this wrong, or not necessarily getting it wrong, but not utilizing this tip, which is shooting at the best times of day whenever you can. So this is really, really important. And by best times of day, I mean sunrise and sunset, and the hour after sunrise and the hour before sunset. It's called golden hour. It's a really common thing, and it's common for a reason. You get really nice side light rather than just top down light like you get during the middle of the day, and it's got a really golden quality to it. And as a result, you also get really nice shadows, really long shadows that you can use to help you with your compositions. And normally you get a better contrast in all the detail and the textures that are around you because of that sideways angle of the light. It's really easy to get a really good photo if you've got really good light, especially if it's backlit through some trees and you've got the sun flare coming out and hitting the car, and it makes a lot of difference. So if you can just make the effort to either get up at sunrise or aim to plan your shoot around what light is likely to be available, then that will instantly step your game up. And this one is a great tip for car photography, is a great tip for portrait photography, and in general, all sorts of different stuff. Anything that's outside is going to be benefited by having really good quality sunset or sunrise light. So try and introduce this into your flow as much as you possibly can. Okay guys, this next one is huge. So learning about composition is going to have a huge impact on your photography. Now, composition can be a huge subject that you could study for years. It's also something that you can get a lot from, even if you just put in a little bit of effort. So all it is, composition is just the way that you're arranging the subjects and the elements in your photo, and that's it. So with car photography, it's going to be things like, where are you placing the car in the frame? How close to the edges of the frame are you placing the car? Are you cropping in or out to remove distractions? Are you shooting wide angle or telephoto, and how does that affect how the car looks within the image? Are you including foreground elements or background elements? There's all sorts of these things that can be affected or that you can change within the frame that you're creating. And how you do that and the rules that are around that can dramatically impact the image. Now, there are some common ones that people have heard of, things like rule of thirds, fill the frame, leaving space, all of these elements, but there are literally 30, 40 different compositional rules that you can study, and that's just the main ones. And any quick look into composition, so if you literally just go onto Google and type in photography composition, there'll be hundreds of examples of the types of elements that you can use, or the way that you can compose a shot, and the different rules that you can use to help you get more compelling shots. And the more you study this subject, the more you'll be able to find them when you're out on your shoots. How often have you been out shooting a car and you've done your basic stuff, you've done your statics, and you sort of think, I don't really know what else to do. I don't feel like I've got any other options here. This location isn't particularly good. And I promise you that if you'd studied composition more, then you'd be able to find another way of shooting the car. It might be a lower angle, it might be a higher angle, it might be using leading lines, it might be all of these other things that you can do that will help you build in more compelling imagery from the situations that you already have. So it's such a good thing to learn, and it helps so much, and it's completely free. So spend a little bit of time looking up and researching composition. I'm going to do my own video on all of the ones that I use, so come back for that. But in the meantime, just research it and you'll be amazed at the impact it can have. Okay guys, another really huge thing is editing. Now I'm assuming that all of you are using some kind of editing program, whether that's Lightroom Mobile, or Photoshop, full Lightroom on your computer, whatever it is. The amount of different tools that they have now, and the amount of techniques that you can use using editing is so massive, and there's so many physical effects that you can mimic with overlays and things like that, adding smoke, adding light flares, adding just extra oomph to your photos, at the same time as giving you certain looks, managing to make the most out of even dull situations. So the impact that you can have from editing is so massive. And again, just like composition, the more time you spend learning what you can and can't do within editing, the more impact it's going to have on your final images. So spend some time on YouTube in some tutorials, learn the software that you have. It doesn't matter what it is, and there are free versions of most of these programs if you're on a budget. So learn them, spend some time, get used to what you can do, find some tutorials online that will help you to figure out what it is that you can and can't do, and how to get the most out of the programs that you already use. Okay, this one is a little bit on the boring side, so I'm going to keep it brief, which is have a plan. The better your plan is, the better structure you have, the better ideas you have, the more backups you have, the more time you spend thinking about it in advance, generally speaking, the better the outcome is going to be. And that can be just little things like knowing what locations you've got to use, having a backup location, making sure that you know the angles that you want to get, or the lighting that you're trying to use, or just the style of images that you're going to want to use because of the type of car it is, or the client that you're using, or the brief that you've got, whatever it is. The more planning you can do in advance, the better the outcome is going to be in general. So plan, have a good plan, have a backup plan, and then absolutely smash it when you get out there. Okay, so one of the biggest factors with automotive photography is the type of car or motorcycle that you're shooting. Now, this is unfortunately a reality, which is that if you only ever photograph basic run-of-the-mill common cars, because you can't get access to better higher end cars, then you will get lumped in to the category of not very good, because if you were, surely you'd be shooting better, nicer, more exotic, more expensive cars. Or if it's in the motorsport arena, it'll be the more prestigious events, the bigger scale, better action, and so on. So ideally your goal is to be shooting as high a tier as you can get to. And so getting access to those cars and having a more compelling subject, i.e. a more interesting car, is automatically going to make people more interested in your work. The perception of you as a photographer is going to go up. So anything that you can do to get access to cool cars and shoot them, or better events, if it's going to be, you know, if you're into drifting, then get to all the drift events you can. If you want to shoot different subjects, if you want to shoot Formula One, try and get there. How to get access to cool cars is a whole subject in and of itself. I've done a whole video on exactly how to build your portfolio, and there's a lot of tips in there about using cars that are for sale to get access, how to get in front of people who do have cool cars. So go and check that out. I'll put a link in the description. But just showing up as much as you can, just shooting as much as you can, finding the coolest cars that you can get access to, and then asking them, do they have friends who have cars? Going to your local dealers and asking them if you can shoot their cars, even if you have to shoot them on the premises because they're not happy if you just take them away. Anything that you can do to get better cars, to build your portfolio, is going to up the quality of your work, just because you'll have nicer, better subjects to shoot. So that's a really top tip. So hopefully you can see, guys, there's a lot of things that you can do to up your game without having to buy any gear whatsoever. You can, the more time and effort you're willing to put in to these things, the more you're going to up your game, the better your results are going to be, and hopefully you'll then be making more money, you'll be getting booked more often, and then if you do decide that you want to get some more gear, then you have the money to buy it. And in the next video, I'm going to be talking about the things that where gear does matter. The gear really doesn't matter that much until it does. And then there's some stuff that does matter. So I'm going to cover that in the next one, but don't let that put you off. Get out there. The better you can get, the more practice you can do, the more you're out there hustling and learning, the better your photography will get, regardless of the gear that you're using. I hope this has been useful for you. If it has, do drop me a like, follow for more, and I'll see you in the next video.
Automotive.